This is Business AM. My name is Simbalaja Charles. Welcome to your economic review. Now, as the country continues to witness a surge in COVID-19 infections, 1,068 people tested positive Thursday for the virus over that period of 24 hours from a sample size of 7,556. Waking up to today, we are talking about more than 900 cases of the coronavirus infections, which have seen the total infections rise to over 49,000. That's the number of confirmed positive cases in the country. Now, the cases recorded Thursday comprised 1,044 and which were Kenyans, and while 24 were foreigners. Now, that also number saw 666 males and 402 females as well. That's exactly where we are, and Kenya has also continued to witness an increase in fatalities in the last few days, with 12 patients having succumbed to the disease Thursday as well. Fantastic. So let's look at where we are this morning in terms of our total infections in the country and our total infection curve. Now, total coronavirus cases that have been confirmed in the country. If you look from the 1st of this month all the way to where we are, you will see that constant rise in the number of infections. I mean, if you look at from 15th all the way to 22nd of this month, and we do expect that that is going to rise as well, going by the recent data that we're having from the Ministry of Health. Fine. That's where we are. And these numbers, if you look at that data as well, you will start saying that it corresponds to the time that the economy was reopened. That is the further relaxation of the measures we took to stop the spread of infections in the country. Which therefore begs the question, are we in the second wave of the coronavirus infection in the country? And to help us understand what these figures mean now, we are joined this morning by Dr. Victor Ng'ani. Victor, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Now, can you sort of paint a picture of whether indeed Kenya is in the second wave of infections, going by this recent data that we have from the MOH?
Well, as I don't even think the first. I think I shared last week. See number, high number. The problem with the testing and the testing protocol as opposed to the numbers itself.
It's quite unfortunate that we can't seem to connect to Dr. Victor Ng'ani this morning. Can you get me Dr. Ng'ani?
Yes, I can get you quite clearly.
Fantastic. Sorry, we seem to have had a problem with your connection just momentarily. Can we therefore get to that? You were saying that you actually don't even believe that we were done with the first wave of infection.
Absolutely, because I think what we saw earlier on when the numbers were low, you'd see very highly fluctuating numbers, where one day the numbers were 700, another it's 60, another 90. You know, that kind of fluctuation does not follow any scientific trend that has been seen with COVID-19. And it shows us that most likely it's an issue with the testing as opposed to an issue with the numbers going down in itself.
Yes.
However, it's very, very clear that regardless of that, there's a huge surge of numbers, and this can be well associated with the relaxation of the rules. And in particular, where I sit right now, I find that relaxation, the one that has been most impactful, is where we are having bars being open, we're having massive rallies, and the biggest tragedy is in this time when our numbers were sort of unreliable, the population got this false impression that COVID was coming down, it was a wave that is passing, and it wasn't so serious.
Let me talk to you about the positivity rate, therefore, which has also shot. Is it possible to say that regardless of the testing numbers or regardless of the efficacy of testing, that if you look at the positivity rate, which has also jumped, that therefore you could say, well, that will point out to a second surge? Because while we had quite a fair positivity rate before these new numbers that we're talking about this morning.
You're absolutely right, because you're seeing positivity rates above 10%, which is quite worrisome.
Yes.
And no doubt, right now, the number of people who are testing positive or who have symptoms but are not tested is very high. But as I'm saying, the initial rates we are looking at, those low rates of less than 5%, in my books, those rates are unreliable because of either sampling or testing protocols. I do not believe that as a nation we have been, we've got this under control. Certainly, there's a big relation between the relaxation of the restrictions that were there and this wave we are seeing. But most importantly, there is this false message, this false confidence that the population has had that COVID is passing. This was created by these numbers that I'm referring to as having been unreliable. And in that season, many of us sort of stopped doing what we used to do. Today, you go outside in Nairobi and you find is now most of the people are not wearing their masks. Business of hand hygiene has sort of been forgotten.
Yes, Dr. Ng'ani, I'm going to come in also and ask you this as well. Well, you are saying that it looks as if we didn't therefore get out of the first infection wave. Could you also comment on the fatality numbers? Because they've also been shooting up. What does that also indicate from a COVID-19 perspective?
Well, COVID for a population now, because 93% of the patients who contracted COVID had very mild symptoms or had no symptoms at all. But then for about 7% of the population, the symptoms were quite severe and to a point where a lot of the patients were actually getting to ICU. Now, with restricted numbers, while we weren't having very many infections at the same time, but this is different now. You're seeing ICUs are full. You're seeing percent is in the service. Critical care, critical disease has never been there. We had very few critical care beds in this, and now we are seeing those beds being overwhelmed. And this is where the logic of flattening the curve comes into play. At this juncture, when we have lifted restrictions to a point where we allow, can I say, partying, we allow drunkenness, we allow people to go into political rallies, then we're having exponential spread of the disease in the country and allowing this 7% that's vulnerable to require advanced care that is COVID centers are full, and then severity is actually much worse than what we'd seen before. Incidentally, earlier on, we were seeing patients who were less than 55, 65 years old not having serious illnesses, serious disease. But as I'm speaking to you, there are quite a number of people, no diabetes, there's reason for us to just wake up very suddenly, let us be jolted back to seriousness and understand that COVID-19 is extremely serious. In fact, the question should be asked thoroughly now about the areas we're opening. Is it a necessity? Remember this, the opening is not because we are safe. No, it's because of the economy to allow people to continue making a livelihood. And therefore, anything that is not necessary in that way, my view, we should more or less backtrack and close those services and allow us to put this thing under control.
Pretty much. Dr. Ng'ani Victor, thank you very much for taking your time to paint a perspective of the recent rise in infections and fatalities of COVID-19 in the country.
Thank you very much.
Pretty much. Now let's move on to the next issue that we have for you this morning here on our economic review, which is pretty much going to talk about what is going at Tuskys. Now, a High Court judge has temporarily stopped the sale of Tuskys assets by its creditors to pay mounting rent arrears. This new ruling coming at a time when the retailer saw its Southfield Mall go under the hammer over unpaid dues. The new directive will come at a proper time when the retailer was facing the planned auctions at Komarak Mall, Tuskys Embakasi and the North Airport Road, which were scheduled for last week. Justice Francis Toyot, in a ruling delivered Wednesday, temporarily froze the planned auction of the company's property by creditors pending directions to be issued on October 27th. Tuskegee landlords in recent weeks have been slamming the auctioneer's hammer on the supermarket's stocks to recover rent arrears. Now, the retailer, still navigating a 40-day liquidation deadline, has in the recent past seen protests by suppliers and workers over unpaid dues as an announcement for a strategic investor still hangs in the balance. The question this morning is, anybody looking at this case will ask themselves, is Tuskegee going down? Tommy Randall, that's your question this morning.
Tuskegee doesn't seem to believe it's going down. They're operating normally. The problem is they have so many court cases against them that where people are trying to recover money owed. They're trying to consolidate everything so that they can come up with a proper payment plan that will allow them to get back to business as usual. They have at least 29 cases that I know of that are in court going on, and an influx of cash. And what happens is if these stores kept getting with the ability to negotiate when it comes to borrowing, because they're saying that they need 2.1 billion, they're getting a 2.1 billion influx soon, and for that to happen, those other court cases need to kind of be put aside for the time being. That way we can see if they can get back on their feet with that.
Pretty much, Tommy, but we do know that Tuskegee is all to the tune of 6 billion shillings in debt, and we're talking about here to suppliers and rent arrears. But now it seems as if some of their mouths are also getting shut. Now, the recent one is the Southfield Mall, which now we do know is now off Tuskegee's, I would say, line. For anybody looking at it, for this strategic investor that they want to bring in, I mean, would you look at that and then say, no, maybe this is not the time for me to come in and bail you out? Yes, we seem to be having technical issues again this morning. We're trying to get Tommy Randall to pretty much paint a picture of what any investor now, any strategic investor, who's seeing headlines like this now, which have seen Southfield Mall taken off Tuskegee's chain, whether this will be some of an issue to any strategic investor who may be wanting to come in and also help bail out the retailer who seems to be in quite some trouble now. I mean, I think we have to take a little break, solve this, come back and continue with our review this morning.